Maybe you're not afraid of failing. Maybe you're afraid of what happens if you finally stop failing. That sounds strange because you've probably spent years telling yourself that all you want is to become more confident, more disciplined, more successful, more consistent. So, why do you keep doing the exact things that pull you away from the life you say you want? Why do you promise yourself that tomorrow will be different, only to repeat the same habits again? Why do you wait until the last minute? Avoid sending the message, leave opportunities sitting untouched, or suddenly lose motivation right when things start going well. You tell yourself you're lazy, that you don't have enough discipline, that other people are just better at life than you are. But what if none of that is actually true? What if you've been fighting yourself without realizing that a part of you believes it's protecting you? Because self-sabotage isn't always about wanting to fail. Sometimes it's your mind trying to keep you safe. And once you understand that, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking a much better question. What is this part of me trying to protect? Think about the last time you had something important to do. Maybe it was applying for a job, starting the business, posting the video, going to the gym, replying to that email, studying for the exam, cleaning your room, calling someone back. None of these things were impossible. In fact, some of them would have taken less than 20 minutes, but somehow you found yourself doing everything except that. You reorganized your desk, watched 3 YouTube videos, scrolled for just 5 minutes, started researching something completely unrelated, made another cup of coffee, folded laundry that could have waited, and the whole time, that task stayed in the back of your mind. You weren't relaxing, you weren't enjoying yourself, you weren't even avoiding it successfully, you were carrying it around all day. It's a strange feeling is that you're not doing the thing, but you're also never free from thinking about the thing. It's exhausting. And nighttime comes. You feel guilty. You tell yourself, tomorrow I'll finally get my life together. You wake up motivated for about 30 minutes, and then somehow the cycle begins again. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone, because self-sabotage rarely looks dramatic. Most of the time, it looks ordinary. It looks like saying, I'll start Monday. It looks like waiting until you feel ready. It looks like constantly planning without ever beginning. It looks like perfectionism disguised as high standards. It looks like telling yourself, I just need a little more time, until months pass, then years, and one day, you don't just feel behind. You start believing that's who you are. Someone who never finishes. Someone who always gives up. Someone who can never stay consistent. But here's something people don't talk about enough. Your identity is often built from your repeated experiences. Not because those experiences tell the truth, but because your brain mistakes repetition for reality. If you've watched yourself quit enough times, eventually, you stop seeing quitting as something you do. You start seeing it as who you are. And that belief quietly follows you everywhere. You don't even notice it anymore. It becomes the voice that says, what's the point? You'll just mess it up again. So why even try? Here's what's fascinating. Your brain doesn't actually care whether you're successful. It cares whether you're safe. Those are two completely different things. Success is uncertain. Growth is uncertain. Being seen is uncertain. Trying something new is uncertain. Your brain doesn't like uncertainty. It prefers familiarity, even if familiarity hurts. Think about that. The mind would rather repeat a painful pattern it understands than risk an unfamiliar future it can't predict. That's why people stay in unhealthy relationships, stay in jobs they hate, stay stuck in routines that make them miserable, not because they enjoy suffering, because suffering they've already survived feels safer than change they haven't experienced yet. The same thing happens inside you. Maybe you've spent years believing you weren't good enough. And now imagine someone suddenly gives you an incredible opportunity. Part of you gets excited, but another part whispers, what if everyone finds out you don't belong? So instead of taking the opportunity, you delay it, you overthink it, you convince yourself it's not the right time. Then you miss it. It hurts. But strangely, it also confirms the belief you already had. See? I knew I wasn't capable. Your brain loves confirmation, even when the belief is painful, because confirmation feels predictable. This is called self-verification. We often behave in ways that protect our existing identity, even when that identity makes us unhappy. If you've always believed you're the unreliable one, you'll unconsciously create situations that make you look unreliable. If you've always believed you're difficult to love, you might push away people who genuinely care. And not because you want to lose them, because being loved consistently feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar feels dangerous. It's almost like your mind says, I know how this story ends. So let's skip ahead. That's why self-sabotage often happens right before something meaningful, right before launching, right before falling in love, right before graduating, right before healing. Because the closer you get to becoming someone new, the louder your old identity becomes. Not because it's true, because it's scared. And fear is very convincing when it sounds like your own voice. Maybe you've done this without realizing it. You finally start eating healthier. You stay consistent for 2 weeks. People notice, you feel proud. Then one bad day happens. Instead of simply having one bad meal, you convince yourself you've ruined everything. So you stop completely. Or maybe someone compliments your work. Instead of accepting it, you immediately point out everything that's wrong with it. Or maybe someone likes you, texts you consistently, shows genuine interest. Instead of feeling excited, you suddenly feel anxious. You start wondering, what if they change their mind? What if I disappoint them? What if they realize I'm not enough? So you pull away first, not because you don't want love, because rejection feels easier when you choose it yourself. That's the painful thing about self-sabotage. Sometimes it gives us the illusion of control. If I quit first, I can't be fired. If I leave first, I can't be abandoned. If I never try, I can't fail. It feels protective. But the cost is enormous. Because every time you protect yourself from possible disappointment, you also protect yourself from possible joy. And slowly, your life becomes smaller. Not because life rejected you, because fear convinced you to reject life first. Sometimes we imagine self-sabotage as one big decision, like someone waking up and deciding, I'm going to ruin my own life today. But that's almost never how it happens. It happens quietly, in tiny moments, the moments nobody else sees. It's the alarm you snooze even though you promised yourself you'd get up. It's opening your laptop and somehow ending up watching videos for an hour. It's almost sending the message, then deleting it. It's saying you'll start after this weekend, then after this month, then after things calm down, then after you're more confident. You keep waiting for a version of yourself that never seems to arrive. And maybe you've wondered, why can't I just do the things I know are good for me? Because the truth is, knowing isn't the problem. Most people already know what would improve their lives. Drink more water, sleep earlier, exercise, apply for the job, leave the unhealthy relationship, start creating, stop comparing. The information isn't missing. What's missing is emotional safety, because your behavior isn't only responding to logic, it's responding to how safe your nervous system feels. And that changes everything. Think about a child learning to walk. When they fall, they don't usually stop forever. They laugh. Someone helps them up. They try again. Now imagine that every time they fell, someone yelled at them, made fun of them, told them they weren't trying hard enough. Eventually, walking wouldn't just feel difficult, it would feel dangerous. Not because walking changed, because their experience changed. The same thing can happen emotionally. Maybe you grew up feeling like mistakes weren't safe. Maybe getting something wrong meant embarrassment, criticism, disappointment, silence. And maybe you learned that love became unpredictable whenever you weren't performing well. So now, as an adult, every new challenge feels bigger than it actually is. Not because the task is impossible, because somewhere inside, failure still feels connected to losing acceptance. That's a heavy thing for anyone to carry. This is why people can look incredibly capable on the outside and still doubt themselves every single day. You might be successful at work, reliable, responsible, the person everyone depends on, but privately, you second guess everything. You reread texts before sending them, replay conversations for hours, assume people secretly don't like you, feel guilty resting, feel guilty saying no, feel guilty celebrating yourself because somewhere along the way, you started believing your worth had to be earned, not simply lived. And when your worth feels conditional, rest feels dangerous. Mistakes feel dangerous. Being seen feels dangerous. Even succeeding can feel dangerous. That last one surprises people. Fear of failure makes sense. Fear of success doesn't. Until you think about it, success changes things. If your video gets millions of views, people expect another one. If you get promoted, more responsibility comes with it. If you finally become confident, you might lose relationships built around the old version of you. If you heal, you can't blame your past for everything anymore. Growth asks you to become someone unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel lonely. So sometimes, without realizing it, people stop themselves before life changes too much. Not because they don't want better, because they're grieving the version of themselves they've known for years. Even if that version was struggling, at least it was familiar. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable compliments can feel? You know, someone says, you did an amazing job, and your first instinct is, oh, it wasn't that good. I just got lucky. It wasn't a big deal. Why? Because accepting the compliment means updating the story you have about yourself. And updating old stories is hard, especially if you've repeated them for years. Maybe you've spent a decade believing, I'm not creative. I'm always behind. I'm awkward. I'm bad with money. I'm just not disciplined. The mind doesn't let those beliefs go easily, even when reality starts proving them wrong. Because identities don't disappear overnight. They slowly loosen. Every time you collect evidence that they're no longer true. This is also why comparison becomes so addictive. You don't compare because you're shallow. You compare because you're searching for proof. Proof that you're enough. Proof that you're doing okay. Proof that you're not falling behind. But comparison is a game you can never win. Because your brain never compares fairly. You compare your ordinary Tuesday to someone else's highlight reel, your first chapter, to someone's 10th, your private doubts, to someone else's public confidence. And every time you do, you accidentally reinforce the belief that everyone else has figured life out except you. But they haven't. Everyone is carrying something you can't see. The person you envy might be lonely. The person who seems confident might be terrified. The person who looks successful might constantly feel like they're about to lose everything. Human beings are much more alike than social media makes us believe. Here's another quiet form of self-sabotage: waiting until you feel motivated. Motivation feels amazing, but it's unreliable. Some mornings, you'll wake up excited. Other mornings, you'll barely want to brush your teeth. If your life depends on motivation, your progress will always feel random. That's why people think disciplined people are different. They're not. They simply stopped negotiating with every emotion they felt. They learned something important. Feelings are real, but they aren't always instructions. You can feel scared and still speak. You can feel insecure and still apply. You can feel tired and still take one small step. You don't have to wait until fear disappears. Most of the time, it won't. Confidence usually comes after action, not before it. There's a quote that says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." And while that sounds poetic, real life usually looks much smaller. The cave is sending the email and having the difficult conversation, posting your first video, going to therapy, setting a boundary, saying, "I don't actually want this anymore," or admitting, "I do." Those tiny moments rarely feel dramatic, but they slowly change the direction of your entire life. Not because they're huge, because they become evidence. Evidence that you're becoming someone who doesn't automatically run from discomfort. And every time you choose differently, even in a small way, your brain quietly begins rewriting the story. Maybe I'm not someone who always gives up. Maybe I'm becoming someone who stays. Maybe I've been stronger than I realized all along. There's something about self-sabotage that makes it feel deeply personal. When you miss another deadline, when you break another promise to yourself, when you quit another habit, it doesn't just feel like you made a mistake. It feels like the mistake is you. And that's what hurts the most. Because eventually you stop saying, "I procrastinated," and you start saying, "I am a procrastinator." You stop saying, "I struggled today," and you start saying, "I'm just the kind of person who can't stay consistent." Those two sentences sound similar, but they create completely different lives. One describes a behavior, the other creates an identity. And identities are incredibly powerful because once you believe something about yourself, your brain starts looking for evidence that it's true. Imagine someone who believes they're bad at making friends. They walk into a room, they feel nervous, they don't talk much. People assume they're shy and don't approach them. They leave thinking, "See, nobody wanted to talk to me." But what actually happened? Their belief changed their behavior. Their behavior changed other people's response, and that response reinforced the original belief. This is one of the quietest traps our minds create. Like, sometimes we're not living our reality, we're living our expectations. The same thing happens with self-worth. If deep down you believe you have to earn love, you'll constantly feel like you're taking a test nobody told you about. You'll overthink texts, replay conversations, apologize when you didn't do anything wrong, feel guilty for having needs, say yes when you want to say no, smile when you're exhausted, laugh at things that hurt you. Not because you're weak, because somewhere along the way, keeping other people comfortable started feeling safer than being honest. People pleasing is one of the most socially accepted forms of self-sabotage. From the outside, it looks kind, generous, selfless, but inside, it often comes from fear. Fear that if you disappoint someone, they'll leave. Fear that if you're difficult, You won't be loved? Fear that your value depends on how useful you are. So you become the dependable one, the easygoing one, the friend who always adjusts, the employee who never complains, the partner who keeps everything inside. Until one day, you realize you've become fluent in everyone else's needs, but you've forgotten your own. And that's a painful place to wake up. Because now you don't even know what you want anymore, only what everyone else expects from you. And maybe that's happened to you. Like maybe someone asks, what do you want to eat? And you genuinely don't know. Not because food is complicated, because you've spent so many years adapting that choosing feels unfamiliar. Or someone asks, what do you actually want? And your mind goes blank because nobody ever taught you that your answer mattered. That isn't a personality flaw. It's something many people quietly experience, especially if they grew up believing that love depended on keeping the peace. Another hidden form of self-sabotage is perfectionism. People often think perfectionists are people who want everything perfect, but that's only part of the story. A lot of perfectionists don't actually finish anything. Because if something stays unfinished, it can never truly fail. Think about that. An unfinished novel still has potential. An unpublished video can't be criticized. An application you never send can't be rejected. A business you never start can't go bankrupt. Perfectionism often sounds like high standards, but underneath, it's usually fear wearing a nicer outfit. That's why you might spend 3 hours choosing a thumbnail instead of uploading the video, or keep rewriting the same email instead of sending it, or research for weeks without ever beginning. It feels productive, but sometimes preparation becomes another hiding place, because as long as you're preparing, you never have to risk being seen. Being seen is terrifying for a lot of people, not because they don't want attention, because attention creates vulnerability. When people see your work, they can judge it, ignore it, misunderstand it, laugh at it. But here's something worth remembering. If nobody can judge your work, nobody can be helped by it either. You can't protect yourself from criticism without also protecting yourself from connection. Those two things usually travel together. There's another pattern that's easy to miss. Overthinking. People often believe overthinking means caring deeply, but many times, overthinking is actually an attempt to control uncertainty. Your mind says, if I think about this long enough, I'll eventually find the perfect answer. So you replay conversations, imagine every possible outcome, practice arguments that never happen, analyze tiny details until you're mentally exhausted. And still, nothing changes, because thinking and moving are not the same thing. Some problems are solved by reflection. Others are only solved by action. No amount of thinking will teach you what one real experience can. Think about riding a bicycle. You could read 50 books about balance, watch hundreds of tutorials, study physics, understand every detail, but eventually, you have to get on the bike. And yes, you'll probably wobble, maybe even fall. But that's how balance is learned. Not inside your head, but inside your body. Life works the same way. Some confidence can only be earned through experience. Here's something else I've noticed. A lot of people don't actually trust themselves. Not because they're incapable, because they have broken so many promises to themselves. I'll start tomorrow. I'll wake up early. I'll stop texting them. I'll finish the project this weekend. At first, those promises seem small, but every broken promise quietly teaches your brain something. It teaches your brain, we don't do what we say. Eventually, Your own words stop feeling believable. And that's heartbreaking because now the person you trust the least is yourself. The good news: trust can be rebuilt, not with huge transformations, not with dramatic declarations, but with tiny promises you actually keep. I'll read one page. I'll walk for 10 minutes. I'll clean this one shelf. I'll send this one email. Small enough that your fearful brain doesn't panic. Consistent enough that your mind begins collecting new evidence, evidence that says, maybe we can trust ourselves again. Healing often looks much less exciting than social media makes it seem. It's usually repetitive, quiet, almost boring, but those ordinary moments are the ones that slowly change your identity. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a tiny one, you become a little harder to convince that you're incapable. And one day, without realizing it, you'll respond differently. Not because you forced yourself, but because the story you believe about yourself has finally started to change. Maybe this entire time. You've been treating yourself like the enemy. Every time you procrastinated, you called yourself lazy. Every time you got overwhelmed, you called yourself weak. Every time you lost motivation, you told yourself you just didn't want it badly enough. And maybe that's the part that has been keeping you stuck. Because you can't shame yourself into feeling safe. You can't bully yourself into becoming someone who trusts themselves. Imagine trying to comfort a scared child by yelling at them. It wouldn't work. They wouldn't suddenly become brave. They would just become quieter. A lot of us do the exact same thing to ourselves. We respond to fear with criticism. We respond to mistakes with punishment. We respond to insecurity by comparing ourselves to people who seem to have it all together. Then we wonder why we feel exhausted all the time. What if instead of asking, why am I like this? You ask, like, when did I learn this? That's a very different question. One assumes something is wrong with you. The other assumes there is a reason. And reasons can be understood. They can be healed. Think about it. Nobody is born believing they're not enough. Nobody is born apologizing for taking up space. Nobody is born believing they have to earn love by being perfect. Those beliefs come from somewhere, sometimes from criticism, sometimes from rejection, sometimes from chaos, sometimes from experiences so small that you barely remember them. A teacher who embarrassed you, a parent who only praised achievement, a friendship that ended suddenly, a relationship that made you feel replaceable. One moment probably didn't create your entire story, but enough moments can. The difficult part is that your mind doesn't always realize those moments are over. It keeps reacting as if they're still happening. You hesitate to speak because years ago someone laughed. You avoid trying because failure once felt unbearable. You struggle to trust people because someone broke your trust before. Your nervous system is trying to protect a version of you that no longer exists. The child, the teenager, the younger adult, the version of you who didn't yet know they could survive disappointment. But you do know now. You have survived things that once felt impossible. Think about the hardest season of your life. At the time, you probably believed you'd never get through it. Yet here you are, still breathing, still learning, still becoming someone new. And that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It means you're more resilient than your fear gives you credit for. One of the biggest misconceptions about healing is that one day you'll stop feeling afraid. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's changing your relationship with it. Imagine you're driving a car. Fear sits in the passenger seat. For years, you've let fear grab the steering wheel. Whenever fear said, don't apply, you didn't. When fear said, don't speak, You stayed quiet. When fear said, "Don't post that," you closed the app. What if fear didn't have to leave the car? What if it just had to stop driving? You can acknowledge it. I know you're here. I know you're trying to protect me. But you're not making today's decisions. That small shift changes everything. Because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're leading yourself. There's another thing I hope you remember after this video. Progress doesn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it feels almost invisible. It looks like choosing to send the email even though your hands are shaking. It looks like getting out of bed after a difficult week. It looks like going for a 10-minute walk instead of convincing yourself that if you can't do an hour, there's no point. It looks like saying no without explaining yourself for 20 minutes. It looks like resting without spending the entire time feeling guilty. Those moments probably won't go viral. Nobody's going to clap for them. But those are the moments your identity changes. Not all at once, one decision at a time. We often think our lives change because of one huge breakthrough. Sometimes they do. But more often, life changes because of tiny moments that repeat. The person who becomes healthy usually isn't the person who exercised for 5 hours once. It's the person who kept showing up. The person who becomes confident usually isn't the one who suddenly stopped feeling insecure. It's the one who kept speaking even while feeling insecure. The person who heals isn't the one who never gets triggered again. It's the one who notices the trigger, pauses, and chooses a different response. Healing is less about becoming a different person and more about becoming someone who doesn't abandon themselves when life gets difficult. Maybe that's the real opposite of self-sabotage. Not discipline, not productivity, not perfection. Self-trust. Because once you trust yourself, you don't have to force every decision. You don't need to spend hours convincing yourself to take one small step. You simply become someone who believes, if this is hard, I'll stay with myself. If I make a mistake, I won't make it mean I'm a failure. If this doesn't work out, I'll still have me. That kind of trust changes the way you move through the world. You stop seeing every setback as proof that you're broken. You start seeing it as something every human being experiences. And strangely, that makes it much easier to keep going. There's something else worth saying. You're probably much closer than you think. Not to having everything figured out, nobody does, but to becoming the version of yourself you've been looking for. Because that version isn't waiting somewhere in the future. They're built by the choices you make today. The choice to be honest instead of perfect. The choice to rest instead of quit. The choice to try again instead of deciding the story is over. The choice to speak to yourself with the same patience you'd offer someone you love. Those choices seem small until you realize they quietly become your life. So maybe the next time you catch yourself saying, "I always ruin everything," pause, ask yourself, is that true? Or is that simply an old story looking for another chance to be believed? Because stories can change, not overnight, but sentence by sentence, choice by choice, day by day. And maybe this is the first sentence of a different one. If this video found you at the right moment, I hope it reminded you that you're not behind. You're not lazy. You're not hopeless. You may simply be carrying patterns that once helped you survive, but no longer help you grow. And the beautiful thing about pattern is that they can be changed slowly, patiently, one small decision at a time. And thank you for spending these moments with me. I hope this felt less like advice and more like someone sitting beside you while you figured things out. If that's the kind of space you're looking for, a place to slow down, understand yourself a little better, and keep growing without pretending to have all the answers, you're always welcome here. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.